Yeah, so I like to think in my mind, the reason I am a good publisher is because I am a writer. And so I know the writer's journey. I know what they're going through, I know what they're coming along with. And so I started writing um maybe when I was younger, right? So a lot of writers you meet probably say, well, I always like to write. And then they got caught up in the, well, I've got to actually make money, so I'm going to get a job. But at some point they come back to writing. And so I like to say that I professionally started writing just a few years ago. However, I actually published my very first novel in 2011. um, and so I did that. I did that through what is called a vanity press, where they don't really help you build your book out. They just take what you've gotten and they push it out, and they call it vanity because it's it gives you the author just a feel good feeling, like, hey, my book is out, it looks good, go buy it. There's a lot of other things that go into writing a book and making it publication ready. But anyway, okay, sorry. So I did that in 2011. It was called The Red in Her Eyes. It did fairly well for a new release. Eventually, I wrote another book. I only released it through Amazon, through their ebook process. And then I started thinking, like, I really want to do this writing thing. I started going to writers' conferences, and those are really great as a writer because there are so many classes that you can take while there to really build upon what you have as a writer. And you learn so many different things.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have an excellent author here with me today. I have somebody who helps authors, which is awesome. For a podcast for authors, the perfect guest is here. Cori Sykes is with me. Cori, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here. Just talking about authors, which is it. People are always like, well, what can you talk about for hours? I can talk about what it's like to be an author and what it's like to be a publisher. And I can just go on until you're just really bored.
Well, we promise no boredom here because you are an amazing guest to have on. Your smile and laughter speaks volumes. So welcome to the show. Great to have you here. You have a website, Write and Vibe, right? Can you tell me more about what's going on here?
Yes. So Write and Vibe Publishing is obviously my baby. It's a publishing company. It is a hybrid version. So this is one of those things that I always go too much into detail. So stop me if I go too deep.
Bring it. Let's go.
Okay. So in publishing, there's like three main routes you can take with publishing. You can go self-publishing, you can go hybrid, and you can also go traditional publishing.
Okay.
So self-publishing is like for the go-getters, for the people who are like, I'm going to watch YouTube and figure out how to do it myself, reading blogs and things like that. Everything that they do is on their own. They may contract out somebody like a book illustrator or somebody like that, but basically they control the timeline, they control the budget and things like that. And then you have traditional publishing. And so traditional publishing is like, I don't know if it's what every author wishes for now, but back in the day, before places like Amazon, KDP, and before those companies came up and allowed regular, normal people to publish their book, the traditional publishing companies kind of controlled everything. And so in the traditional publishing route, and that's companies like Penguin, Random House, Simon and Schuster, Hachette, Scholastic, places like that. And so in that route, you go and you kind of are either approached by or you approach a literary agent, and then they shop your book around to the publishers. So that's the traditional publishing route. Write and Vibe sits in the middle. So we're known as a hybrid publishing route. In my opinion, not just because I own the company, I believe it is the best of both worlds. So for self-publishing, you have to do everything yourself, right?
Yeah.
So hybrid publishing, most hybrid publishers will do everything for the author while working with the author. And it'll be faster. The author will receive higher royalties. And there's a few other key differences, but they're also not as select as who they take on. So they will take on books that match the books that they publish, right? But it's like for hybrid publishers versus traditional, you don't necessarily have to have a million followers. You don't necessarily have to be a celebrity, like you're not an actor, you are quote unquote a regular citizen.
Right. Yeah.
And so we're not going to say, well, no, I mean, we're not going to tell the author no just because they don't have the celebrity status.
Right. Okay. So for a new author that's going to start writing, say this weekend, they're starting to write their book. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A very early stage.
Yes.
When is a good time to start building community around your project? When you're starting to write or when you're published?
Okay. So I say it's kind of in the middle, right?
Okay.
If you wait until after you're published to build a community, it could potentially be too late because with social media and everything now, people love to follow your journey. They like to be included in the journey. If you have versus like if you have just started writing, that might be too early because if you're just starting out, there's a lot of times where you don't exactly know where your story is going to go. You may change the characters, you may change the names, you may even change the title of the book several times. And so you do want to make sure that you have an established book going on, right? So maybe about 3/4 of the way when you're done, before you're done writing, I say that's a good time to start kind of promoting the book and letting people know that, hey, like I'm an author. This is great. I've started writing my book. This is what it's about. These are the characters. I think you'll love it because, and that's an important part too, right? Because new authors and even like authors with new projects, that are even like, so authors with established authors with new projects, right? Sometimes we get so excited about the project that we think other people are just going to love the project because we love it, right?
Right.
And that's not necessarily true. So you'll have your family and friends and your people that are going to support you because you're you. Your goal is to reach the people outside of that community. And so doing things, of course, like, coming on your podcast or doing other things like, posting on social media or just going to author events and just talking to other authors, getting involved in the communities. Like, I'm not going to say every community has a writing group, but you could probably find some other writers that are in your area that you can, bond with over things that other people may not understand, like how lonely it is to be a writer sometimes.
Yes. Yes. I hear that a lot. You feel like you're writing in a vacuum and, who am I to write this book? Who's going to read this thing? Right. All that, those feelings. So
Yeah.
that's an uphill climb for a lot of authors.
It is. It is.
Okay. So when would an author approach you at Write and Vibe? When do they come through the door or send you the email? At what point in their journey of writing their book?
Yeah. So there are different publishing companies are going to have their timelines, right? Write and Vibe's timeline and what I suggest to other writers, even if they're not coming to Write and Vibe, I suggest that you must have your project 3/4 of the way complete.
Okay.
And so I say this because the way Write and Vibe functions is we complete developmental editing and we work with a lot of first-time authors. And so authors are artists, regardless of how they're seen by other artists. And so as an artist, a lot of times what we picture in our head is not necessarily what we write on the pages. And that's not necessarily what the reader gets. So, so our developmental editing process comes in and we say, what do you, Dave, what are you trying to project onto these pages? What do you want your readers to get from your book? And that's especially important if it's a nonfiction. I don't work too much with nonfiction. I do work really well with fiction, genre fiction writers. So what is your goal for the book? What are you envisioning the whole story playing out as? And so you tell me, and I say, oh, okay, I see where you're going. Well, in this chapter, you're kind of saying this, and the audience can take it as that. And so we work with the author to make their story come to life. And so the difference between some traditional publishing companies as well is they may take your manuscript and they may edit it to a point where it's something that is popular, right? And what the readers are looking for because it's hot now. Mm-hmm. We're not going to do that. We're not going to take the most popular genre at the time. We're going to take your story and we're going to make sure that your story is your story and that's what gets published. And we're going to combine that to what you want your readers to gain from your story.
That makes sense, because I would think that if I put my heart and soul into writing something and then I put it on your desk or a publisher's desk and it comes back to me and it doesn't even sound like me anymore, I'm like, this is not me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I am so edited here that if my family and friends read this, they'd be like, Dave, this isn't you talking. Who is this? Right?
Exactly. You want your story to be your story.
Right.
When a writer first sits down and decides to write a book, they're not sitting down because they want to write somebody else's book. They're sitting down because they want to write their book. Right. They have a story to tell that is probably deeply ingrained in them. It probably gives them all types of feels and everything. And we want to keep that so that when you hold your book in your hands for the first time, you're excited. You're not kind of like, it's okay. It's not really what I wanted it to be. That's not the dream.
It's amazing. Okay, so tell me about some of your authors that have come through Write and Vibe. Tell me any success stories that pop into mind, a little thing that we can use to encourage authors with.
Yeah, so our very first author, our very first book, I met a guy, and other things you can only discuss with your sister girlfriends. It is a nonfiction humor and comedy book by Valencia Joy.
Okay.
And so what she's doing in her book is kind of discussing all things that kind of women go through. So she'll touch on divorce. She touches on dating. She even touches on things like reality TV shows. And excuse me. And so her book has done very well. She has been on TV shows. She has been on podcasts. She has won awards. And, and I just want to throw this out there because I got the news I got the news on April 1st, I think it was. 4 of our books won awards at the Book Fest Spring Awards. So Yay. I met a guy, won first place. The book Stormy Nights by Dominique Crystal Dawn. Okay. She got second place in her urban fiction book, Stormy Nights, of course. Our children's book, Curiously Kara Meets Pharaoh Hatshepsut, that got third place in the children's genre. And then our romance book, Just Like Old Times, got second place in the urban romance group. Wow. So that was amazing. As a small-time publisher who only has 5 books on the board, with one coming out April 26th, that was just an incredible goal to have accomplished. And I've only been open since like late 2020. So it was a really like a awakening moment. Like, sometimes even as authors or publishers, small time publishers, you can be like, I don't really know if I'm doing a good job, because sales don't always equate to doing a good job. You could have the best book out there and you may have only sold 50 copies. And so you're really just kind of waiting for the big break. And so I'm kind of getting off
No, I
topic
like
here.
it. I like you're taking me down. You're taking me to school. I love this. This is great. It's awesome.
But yeah, so sometimes you just don't really know if you're doing a good job. You don't feel it because, oh, I haven't sold a book today, or this other person's book, which in my mind, my book is better, is selling more. You start comparing yourself to other books, and you go down this whole rabbit hole. And next thing you know, you're crying on the bed, and it's filled with tissues, and you're like, I'm the worst writer ever. I don't ever want to write again. And yeah. So, things like the good reviews and awards, and those are all great things to boost like the writer's mental.
I love it. So the one thing I hear from authors sometimes is they feel that the moment the books arrive on their doorstep in a box and they open them for the first time and there they are, the final copies, the published books are here, that I'm done. I can put my feet up, I can relax, I can go grab a drink. I'm a published author. And then they realize that the finish line they thought was coming up actually says start. Doesn't say finish. It's like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about? I just spent all this time writing a book, and now I have to start like getting out promoting my book.
Yes.
Apart from being on a podcast, which we're going to talk about your book in a moment. What else would you advise your authors about getting out there and promoting their book? How do we do it?
Yeah. So it takes a lot of groundwork in the beginning. There's always social media, right? You can always get out and blast it on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and whatever else there is out there that'll help you just kind of get it to the masses. But those can be really finicky because they're based on algorithms that once you figure out the algorithm, then they're changed the algorithm and you're back to like square one. And so definitely it's mostly groundwork, and you have to watch that groundwork kind of expand to other communities. So one thing I spent a lot of time doing last summer and the summer before is going to author events that weren't local. Well, I went to local and ones that were outside of my locality. And so you do that because then you can interact with writers that are outside of your location. You can say, hey, what are you doing? You can ask them questions. They can see your face. They can get to know your personality. You can support them and they can see, oh, they supported me. So then it's not required, but they may also support you. They may recommend you or your work to a friend. I mean, and that's what it's all about. Also make sure to go to libraries. Libraries almost always have events like that. Talk to your local librarian, ask them if you can have a book signing there. Ask them if you're good at this. Ask them if you can give a class on writing, because sometimes you can say, oh, I want to have a writing, but people who don't know you mostly will need a reason to come to your book signing. So don't just combine it with, I'm signing my books, this is why you'll love the book. But so you include, I'm signing my books. And in addition, I'm also going to tell you the most valuable thing you'll learn, or something like, I'm going to show you the process of how I worked with a cover designer. And so you can say things like that. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, more people may come. So because you also taught them, you gave them something, they also may purchase your book in return.
Nice.
So it is like a process. And then as always, there's always a lot of book events that go on as well. Go to those. I met an author one time who had sold a lot of books. And so she said her goal was to go to events where she was the only author represented as the vendor. And so because she was the only author, she was the only one selling a quote unquote like unique product. And so if she was at a hair show, right? And people are talking about like flat irons and curling irons and different types of products. And then someone else comes along to her table and they're like, oh, you wrote a book. And she's like, yeah, I wrote a book. And then they buy it because then she's not competing against a whole line of people who are trying to sell their books.
Right.
And then also, when you go to the events as a vendor, make sure you have a sale line. So it's like, in my book, I talk about this and this and this and this, and make sure it's like 30 seconds or less, because as people are going from table to table, they don't want to stop for 5 minutes to hear why they should buy your book.
Right.
They need it quick and fast. And then also don't always stay behind the table. Just come from outside of the table. Smile at them as they pass. Some people are just gonna like, I've seen it. They kind of come to your table, not even come to your table, but they're walking and they don't, they're acting like they don't hear you saying hello, hello. I've seen one person even like put up their hand over their face, like it makes them invisible. Right?
Yeah. You can't see me because I've done this. Yeah, I put my hand up on my face. I love it.
Yeah, so it's funny. But that just comes with the territory. You're creating a ground movement for your book. And so your objective is to sell your books after it is released.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop in the first month. It doesn't stop 3 years later. You are always marketing your book.
Right.
I talked to another author one time who's written upwards of like 40 books. And so I was just kind of asking her, because when you write so many books, you're always promoting your newest book. And I was like, well, do you ever, because you've written so many books, do you ever promote your 5th book or your 10th book? And she's like, oh, yeah, always. And so she is based highly on social media. So she says, even though I may say, buy my latest book, every now and then I'll say, hey, have you heard of this book I wrote? And she says, what that does is the people who are new to your journey, may not have gone backwards into your titles, they'll say, oh, well, I'm going to get that book because I loved her latest book. And so always promotion never ends. And I say this, you probably thinking like, oh, Cori, you're so great at promotion. I'm not. I'm really horrible at it. I'm really bad at social media. But I know what I'm supposed to do. And so that's why I'm able to pass on. I know what I've learned and what people have told me. So I'm able to pass on and tell you all the tricks in the world. Am I implementing them every day? Maybe even every weekly? No.
There you go. See, well, at least you're honest. I love that. That's your real person. Okay, let's talk about your book. What's going on? Like, you not only are you helping authors, but you're doing it yourself. Let's talk about your journey of you writing your own book. This is great.
Yeah, so I like to think in my mind, the reason I am a good publisher is because I am a writer, and so I know the writer's journey. I know what they're going through. I know what they're coming along with, and so I started writing maybe when I was younger, right? So a lot of writers you meet probably say, well, I always like to write.
Yeah.
And then they got caught up in I've got to actually make money, so I'm going to get a job. But at some point they come back to writing. And so I like to say that I professionally started writing just a few years ago.
Okay.
However, I actually published my very first novel in 2011. And so I did that. I did that through what is called a vanity press, where they don't really help you build your book out. They just take what you've gotten and they push it out. And they call it vanity because it gives you the author just a feel good feeling like, hey, my book is out, it looks good, go buy it. There's a lot of other things that go into writing a book and making it publication ready. But anyway, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So I did that in 2011. It was called The Red in Her Eyes. It did fairly well for a new release. Eventually, I wrote another book. I only released it through Amazon, through their ebook process. And then I started thinking, like, I really want to do this writing thing. I started going to writers' conferences, and those are really great as a writer because there are so many classes that you can take while there to really build upon what you have as a writer. And you learn so many different things. You also get to speak to lit agents there most of the times. Typically, there can be like an extra charge, but I always recommend it, even though it could be hard. So if I could just journey off real quick. And so when you talk to a lit agent at these conferences, you pay just a little bit more and you usually submit, I think it's like 20 pages of your work in progress or your full manuscript. And so you don't put your name on it, or you don't put your name on it. And then you meet with them and they tell you what they loved about the project. They give you literary agent, traditional publishing advice, which can be hard if you're not prepared to get critical feedback.
Yeah. Okay.
However, if you use that critical feedback, you can become a really good author. You can say, I see why they said that. Like you just look at it a different way. In addition, there's other things that you can do at the conference. Again, you can meet other writers from all over. You can also get involved in, I think they call them first page reads, where you don't put your name on them. I think you put the title and then you put like the genre on there. And so during these first page reads, you may have like 3 to 5 lit agents up. And so one of them in particular that I went to, somebody reads the first page and then the lit agents hold their hand up when they would have stopped reading it. And so as a reminder, this is only the first page. And if they're saying, I wouldn't even go past this first page, then you realize that because on the first page, you have to hook somebody.
Yeah.
And so they're reading it. And so because they're putting their hand up, once you get like a few hands up, they'll stop reading. However, remember, it's anonymous. So nobody knows it's your work, but they're giving feedback as to what you can do to make it better. And then sometimes I do want to put out there that like, when the first page is really good, you can actually get a deal with a lit agent at these companies. If they're like, oh man, I really love this. I'm interested in reading the rest of the work. It's like a writer's dream. And that's what everybody's hoping when they get there. So there's that. I'll go back to my book now. And so I decided that I wanted to be kind of like a serious author because I'd learned so much at these conferences. I'd talked to so many different people. I'd taken the classes and I was like, I'm ready. And so I started like putting out classes, like I'm giving classes, this just kind of sharing what I've learned. And then let me see, where did I go from there? So I started giving classes. And because of that, I was like, I want to open up a writer's center where we can all just like come together and just be with each other. Or if not even be with each other, we can just go to our own corner of the building and write.
Yeah.
And so that's how Write and Vibe was born. And so the Writer's Center didn't actually open because that's when COVID happened. And I was like, oh no, my little baby dream is like going down the drain. But one of the aspects of the center in the future was to publish the writer's books in that center. And so I had to, what they call, or what someone told me one day and it stuck, it's like a purposeful pivot. And so I purposely pivoted to the publishing aspect. And so I decided to publish my own book as well. And so that very first book that I mentioned, The Red in Her Eyes,
Yeah.
I pulled that from publication, and I took the elements of it, and I decided to rewrite it and release it under the Write and Vibe imprint. And so that's where the romance book came from. I write romance under the pen name of Chichima Cherry. That name came about because my nickname is Chi Chi, but Chi Chi Cherry didn't actually sound right. So it's like Chichima Cherry.
Yeah.
And Cherry came about because I have a love for cherries, and I just like
Cool.
I just love cherries so much. Not the red cherries, but the really deep red cherries with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
seeds in the middle. I love those cherries. And so my pen name for romance is Chichima Cherry. And so I wrote that, and the title of that now is Just Like Old Times. So again, it's a rewrite of The Red in Her Eyes, and it is about the two main characters, Trey and Tristan, who had a college romance that ended. It just kind of ended, and then they get back together. But of course, the Tristan, one of the main characters, is struggling, like, because she doesn't understand or even know why Trey disappeared. And so they have to work through that whole process. And so the book does flip between current day and the past, and it unveils Trey's story little bit by little bit. So that is out, Just Like Old Times by Chichima Cherry.
Nice.
I also write children's books under the pen name of Karen May. And so that name came about because that is my late mother's name. And so, excuse me. So what happened there is that my mother passed away. She went into the hospital for a stroke. She was released to rehab, and she died just a couple of days later. And so, because in my mind, she was a little bit younger, right? I was like, oh, she died so early. I mean, when you look at death a different way, you go, in my opinion, when it's time, right? Regardless of whether I believe it's too early or anything like that,
Right.
everything works together. And so, but still, she didn't. So for me, she didn't get to take the fun journeys that she got to take with my oldest daughter. I have two daughters. One is 18 and one is 5. So when she passed away, my youngest was just like a year and some change.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm just going to take a
Yeah,
drink of
yeah,
water.
please.
And so because she passed away when my youngest was younger, I was like, oh, well, they didn't get to do the fun things that she did with my oldest daughter. And so I wanted to have a way for her to travel with my youngest daughter. And so I was like, well, they can journey together all types of places in these books, the Curiously Cara books. Um, and so now they do. In addition, the pen name came from her name. Her name was Karen. Her middle name was May. And so she
Nice.
also always wanted to be a writer. So now symbolically,
Mm.
she is a writer, and she gets to take those journeys with my youngest daughter. So the first book, Curiously Cara meets Pharaoh Hatshepsut, that in that book, they take a journey to Africa, Egypt, and they meet Pharaoh Hatshepsut. She's one of the second known woman pharaohs. She instituted trade. She was like a great builder. One of the temples, Jezeru, was built under her reign. And so she
Wow.
was really like a really, really like just awesome person. Back in the day, they didn't even know she existed because somebody tried to I guess, like smear her history. They don't know to this day whether it was her like stepson or if it was other people because she was a woman. And so they didn't,
Mm. Right.
So, but she is very well known now. And so the first book, and that was released in July of 2021.
Right.
The second book, Curiously, Kara Meets Queen Amanirenas, that comes out April 22nd. And in that one, I actually included my oldest daughter. I didn't want her to feel left out.
Nice. Nice.
And so and her name is actually Amani. So Kara is my youngest daughter's name. My oldest daughter's name is Amani. And so that's how I tied her into this second book. Amanirenas was a real queen. She was a queen of the Kingdom of Kush, which is modern day Sudan. And so she was another really, really cool African queen. During her reign, she reigned in the beginning with her husband, who died in battle, and then her son also died in battle. So she was the queen of their kingdom, and they were fighting off the Roman army, which at that time was the most powerful army in the world.
Right.
And so it was really funny as I was like studying her and learning about her reign. When I released these books, they are accurate historically. They do have some elements of fiction in it, of course, because obviously my daughter and my mom were not there.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
But yeah, so I do a lot of research when I am writing the children's books. And so the readers and their little learners will learn a lot. So this Queen Amanirenas, she actually, there's a statue of Caesar Augustus where you only see the head of the statue. She's the one that cut off the head. Yeah.
Really?
So yeah. And she buried it under her like temple, right? So that people could symbolically like trample on the head of the statue. And so that's why when we see it in history, that's why that statue, we only see the head. I think the body of the statue might be somewhere, but yeah. And so it was pretty interesting to learn that. And again, I also learned like Caesar Augustus, he was a man of many names. Like, and so he had like a different name as a little boy. So he went by Caesar Augustus, Augustus Caesar. I think it was even Julius Caesar at one point. I make mention of that in the back of the book, just so there's no confusion. But yeah, so that book comes out April 26th. I learned so much, and I really I love writing fiction, but I really love writing the children's books because I learn so much as I go.
Right.
And so the way I package it so that little learners can kind of understand it better is the book also includes a talking cat. So I like to say it's like, let me see. I like to say it's like the old show Wishbone.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't remember that. And so I probably age myself every time I say that. But it's like a mashup between Wishbone and the Magic School Bus. And so you're both in both shows, the kids were learning a bunch of things.
Yeah.
But in Wishbone, there was the talking dog. And so in this one, there's a talking cat named Daisy. When they get to their destinations, Daisy wears like a tiny crown on her head, and the crown is what allows her to talk. Other than that, when she's home, she's a regular cat who just sleeps all the time and eats.
I like Daisy. This is fun. This is great.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what's coming next then after this? This book coming out soon. Is there more coming down the way?
I don't have any on the schedule right now, but I always like to say that there's going to be more coming along. As long as I'm alive to publish other writers' books, and as long as I'm alive, I'll always be writing. And so I do, for the Curiously Kara series, I do plan to have another book. And so I call them the African Queen series. And then, so there will be at least 3 in the African Queen series. And then I do hope to branch out and include other different things. So one of the things I've been playing around with is introducing the planets to the kids. So each planet has like a characteristic based on astrology. And so I kind of wanted to introduce the little learners to astronomy and kind of little bits of astrology at the same time.
Nice.
And so again, it'll come just like not right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You got a couple things on your plate. I get that.
Yeah. And then with the Just Like Old Times My Romance series, there will be 6 books in this one. It's called The Dalton Family. And so the main character, Trey, he's the first story, but he also has a brother, Derek, who will have his own story. And then there will also be one for his sister, Chelsea, and then also a few for his cousins. And so there'll be 6 in that series. And if I can write very fast, it'll be 1 a year, but I do also publish other people's books. And so I am the editor of those. And as I mentioned earlier, I go very in depth with the editing. And so that does take some time as well. Yeah, and that's another thing too. Just to circle back about like writers and getting their book published. They should always know that it's not, and it shouldn't be a very fast process. Everything needs to take time. You need to make sure that the story is right. You need to make sure that it's been edited professionally. Microsoft Word and Grammarly, they're not professional editors. They do a very good beginning check, but you need a professional editor to help you along the way.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that your cover is right. And so even if you don't really know how to or where to go with the covers, I suggest going to any bookstore, any library, finding your specific genre. So say you write science fiction. Go to the science fiction section, pull out all the covers, pick out maybe the top 3 that look the coolest to you, and then ask yourself some questions. Why do I like that cover? What's making that cover stand out to me?
Smart.
Because like when a reader who doesn't know you, say your book is in the library or the bookstore, when a reader comes up, they will judge your book by the cover. And so
it's true.
They're going to first, they're going to pick it up. They're going to look at the title. Does the title grab them? Oh yeah, I like that title. They're then going to move to like the second level where they're going to look at the cover. Oh yeah, I like that cover. Then they're going to move to the third level where they read the back of the book description. So like the blurb. Oh, I love the blurb. So at that point, they'll either take it home or they'll go one step further and start flipping through the book. Ooh, do I love this first page? No. So they might put it back. But there's so many elements outside of just that story where people will kind of either say, I'm going to pick it up or I'm going to put it down. And then also you need to make sure the price is right. So you don't price your book so high that people aren't going to take it home. It's got to fit in science fiction pricing. Don't underprice it as well, because it can be quite expensive to sell a book or to make a book. And so there's a lot of different things. Make sure your genre is correct. Because if you say you write science fiction, but someone reading science fiction picks it up and they're like, this is a romance book, 1 star.
That's it.
I don't like the love scene, you know?
Good point. I love it. So Cori, before we go, if someone was going to come to you and work with you, who would be your ideal author that would definitely benefit by working with you guys?
Yeah. So I love authors who have already thought deeply through their story. I love authors who aren't afraid to have a critical reflection on their book. I love authors who are lifetime authors. There's nothing wrong with people who want to put out one book because everybody's like, I have this story in me. I just want to release it. But when someone says like, I just want to be a writer, there's a difference in a mindset there, because that shows that they're in it and they want to grow with their craft. Yeah, I love writers like that. I love it when they, and not only that, like I tell writers when they come in, because I give a free 30-minute consultation. And so the point of that is to make sure that you can not only work with me, but that I can work with you as well, because we work so closely. I always say, look, it's like we go together now. Like I'm taking it back to like high school, middle school. I'm like, we go together.
Yeah,
you gotta trust me. I have to trust you. We're in a partnership until this book is published. And even then, I'm not leaving your side. I'm just kind of taking a step backwards so that you can flourish, right?
Right.
So, yeah, trust is essential with all of my writers.
So if writing is the prom, you're the excellent prom date then.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Under the sea prom, you're going to be the one. Okay. All right. I love it. I love it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So take us to the website again. Where do we go? Where are you most active? Where do we go?
Yeah. Yeah. So the website is writeandvibe.com. And so because we're writing, again, it is the WRITEANDVIBE.com. And so then you can also follow on Instagram, Write and Vibe. We're on Facebook. Yeah, those are the places: Facebook, Instagram, and our website. On the website is where you can book a free 30-minute consultation. You can just go straight to the calendar and pick a day. I have one day open for if you need a late appointment because you're working or things like that. I don't but I try not to work on Fridays. So Fridays and the weekends will be closed. Fridays are reserved for projects like editing and things like that. So we are growing, and I love working with most fiction genres. Children's books, I'm still perfecting that process. And so once it is perfected what am I saying? Yeah, once it is perfected, then I will open that up to publishing others' books. But I'm very much a perfectionist when it comes to putting out the best product. I do not, I'm not going to put I will always put my best foot forward with your project. So until I know that I can put my best foot forward with a children's book project other than my own, it will stay kind of just like coming soon.
Good. Mm-hmm. I love it. And we're working our way towards the possibility of having some of your authors join us here on Living the Next Chapter. So if you're listening and you work with Cori, we're coming for you. Just so you know, we're coming for you. But I love having you on, Cori. You've given us so much amazing detail for authors that are listening. This is one of those episodes where we're going to have to rewind and go back to the show notes and get this, because there's so much amazing information that you've given for free today. Thank you for doing that.
Yes,
it's just a taste of what you're going to get if you come and work with Cori. So
that's right.
Please go and check out all of the great authors from Write and Vibe, and check out all the great books from Cori as well. So Cori, thank you for being part of the podcast. Love having you here. Thank you for making time for us. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. Everyone, please go check the show notes and give Cori some love. Let her know you heard her on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And and then again, we might have some more authors coming from Cori's group. So that'd be awesome. So thank you, Cori, so much for being here.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Hey, look, we're having such a great time talking to authors around the world. If you are an author and you would like to be on this very show, I would love to talk to you. livingthenextchapter.com, livingthenextchapter.com, livingthenextchapter.com is the best way to get in touch with us. There you'll find our social media and blah, 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 la-di-da, and such. You, author, soon-to-be author, new author, currently writing your book author, published author, we need you here. The seat's empty, microphone set up, we're waiting for you. livingthenextchapter.com. We would love to have you on the podcast. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Yeah, you should be here. We'll see you at livingthenextchapter.com.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.